Welcome to Is Franchising Right for You? With your host, Rick Morgin. Through each episode, we'll demystify preconceived notions about franchising, both entrepreneurs franchising and those buying a franchise. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Now here's the host of Is Franchising Right for You? Rick Morgin.
Hello. Hey, Jason. How are you
Hey,
doing?
Rick, how are you? Fantastic.
I'm doing well, and thank you for being a guest on my podcast, Is Franchising Right for You? And I think we'll eventually get to the topic of why habits are important to franchising. But is the name of your company Happily Habits Ever After?
Happily Ever Habits. Yeah,
Or Happily Ever Habits?
there you go. Yeah.
How did that come about? I mean, that's such an interesting topic.
Yeah. It was based off of a conversation with a friend of mine, and I was talking with her about this concept of writing a book and doing a podcast and talking about what the main idea is behind what I'm trying to do, which is really this concept of creating a happily ever after in our lives. And yet we all know that the movie version of a happily ever after doesn't actually happen, but oftentimes we get a bit jumbled, or we put our focus in the wrong place in what will actually lead to a happier, more productive, more successful life. And so this is a reminder that what it actually comes down to is what you do, and most importantly, what you do consistently, and that is habits. And so intentionally creating the outcomes that we want is simply a matter of doing the right things consistently over time, creating the habits that will bring results.
Now, I know you've worked with industry leaders. And how did that go? I mean, did they come to you and say, "Hey, let's break down my habits because I need to make these improvements. I want to accelerate the growth of our company or improve my leadership." And because it seems like success comes from developing good
Mhm.
habits, but then maybe there's bad habits that have to be let go.
Yeah.
It may be really tough.
Yeah. Most often, the people that I work with feel themselves in some type of state of being stuck. We call them ruts, or I feel like I'm spinning in circles, or I feel stuck. And the common denominator is I'm not getting the results that I want, whether that's personal finance, personal health and wellness, whether that's business, sales. It's just I'm not getting the outcomes that I'm looking for. And so most of the work I do is coaching with people to say, okay, well, then let's look at what it is you're doing. Because if you're not getting the results you want, we got to start by looking at what you're doing on a consistent basis and try to identify, are the things you're doing on a consistent basis even possibly set up to get you to the results that you want. So often we're doing things consistently and getting outcomes that are kind of no brainers. It's like, yeah, no kidding. You're getting these results. Look at what you do every day. And then we have to decide, well, gosh, if I want different results, then I have to start engaging in different behaviors.
So does that come down to things that are being done are kind of automated or just repetitive and not really intentional? So it becomes where you're just doing it and not
Yeah.
really saying, okay, I'm doing this because of this result, and not thinking about, hey, I'm not getting the success I want.
Yeah. And part of it is we are fighting a little bit against our own physiology and biology. In The Power of Habit, Charles Duhigg references this incredible research that was done on rats, and they monitored brain activity of rats. And when they would put them into a maze for the first time, brain activity was really high. because the rat was trying to work its way through the maze to find the reward. But the longer you put these animals into this similar pattern, their brain activity was high at the beginning, but then it would drop dramatically because they had done this so many times. Then when they would get the reward, the brain activity would spike again. And the same thing happens with humans. We do the same thing over and over again, almost because it requires less brain activity, and our brains are wired to keep us alive as long as possible. So let's reduce the amount of energy necessary to do anything. And so biologically, we're actually driven to do the same thing over and over. Which is always funny because people, when we talk about, say, exercise or other business behaviors, people say, well, gosh, I'm not very consistent. And I always say, no, you are very consistent. As human beings, we are incredibly consistent. What we're not good at is change. So when we see a new behavior that we want to implement, we're not great naturally at implementing a new behavior because our brains are biologically wired to do the same thing over and over and over again. And so it does take conscientious, intentional, disciplined effort, which we're not good at. And so that's why there's some kind of tips and tricks that can make you more successful, help you overcome some of this biological stuff that's going on.
Well, I can see that where you help is those new habits, somebody may not recognize them.
Yeah.
So when you break it down, you recognize, well, we need to make this change.
Yeah.
And then your expertise comes into accountability of correct? Am I correct in that?
Yeah. Knowing that somebody is watching is oftentimes an important factor in behavior change. And having someone to whom you can be accountable is another important factor. So that part of coaching is very helpful because the easiest person to convince of something is yourself. Like I have every excuse in the book around why I don't take certain actions. And what's great is I believe my own excuses. If an employee gave me the same excuse that I give myself, I'd be like, get out of here. What are you talking about? I give myself that excuse and I'm willing to accept it. And so sometimes that's a problem. So having someone that can help you be accountable and kind of mirror back and talk through, okay, what are the behaviors that are really going to lead me towards my goals can be helpful.
So are habits the same as processes? I'm just thinking about that.
Yeah. Typically, when I think of habits and processes, habits tend to be something personal, and processes or systems tend to be trying to implement things outside. Either teams use processes, or we might have a process for how we manage incoming sales or how we manage customer acquisition. And so I think the nuts and bolts of it, the pieces of it are pretty much the same. Habits tend to generally be personal, and systems and processes tend to be organizational.
Oh, okay. So in a franchise system, if the processes of a proven system are what that franchise owner, that franchisee should follow.
Yeah.
And not deviate. But getting the habits of getting to implement and execute the processes, I see that's the personal side.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And it's so fascinating because most of the people that I work with, I don't introduce behaviors that they are unaware of. Nobody ever says, oh my gosh, I never thought of that. I never thought I should do that consistently. Almost everybody says, I know I'm supposed to be doing this. I'm just not doing it. And how do I get myself to be more consistent in doing the thing? And that's why franchising is so powerful, is because, yeah, there is a proven system. There is a proven process by which we can become successful. It's really comes down to how effectively, consistently, and efficiently can I implement that system and process. And so that's where these habits come in, is to say, I know what I'm supposed to do. I just got to get myself to do it.
Right. Right. Does that maybe, for somebody who's implementing that type of a habit, create a daily checklist that they can go through and kind of systematize those
Mhm.
habits to get to those processes that they need to do to be successful?
Yeah. Checklisting is a great addition, a great way to become consistent with certain behaviors. Absolutely one of the tactics and tools that can be utilized, because as human beings, we love a checklist. We love to jot stuff down and be able to go through and check it off. It's also a byproduct of whatever our brains are good at memory storage. They're not as good at memory recollection. And grocery stores are the most easy analogy here. You're thinking all week long about what you need at the grocery store, and then you go to the grocery store and you can't remember what it is. You're like, I know I was supposed to get four things, and what was the fourth thing I was supposed to get? I can't remember. And then you're driving home and it pops into your head and you're like, oh my gosh, why couldn't I remember that at the time? Well, the same thing is true of behavior. Is our minds are sometimes we just get into consistent patterns, we get going, and our momentum is just taking us in a certain direction, and we sort of forget, we don't remember, oh my gosh, I was supposed to do this today. If you've ever had that, oh my word, I was supposed to do this today moment, that's where a checklist can be very helpful. And that's where the system, the process, the handbook becomes very useful to go back and say, okay, what's the next thing? What's the most important thing? What's the critical next step that I'm supposed to implement?
Uh, Going back to that grocery store example, I use the list function on my iPhone.
Yeah.
So here's the store, here's the Costco, here's the other store, stuff I normally get. And sometimes, of course, I'll forget. It's just funny. I'll forget when I pull up into my driveway.
Yep.
Oh, crap.
I usually remember about 2 seconds before my wife asks me, hey, did you remember to get this? And I already know, I'm like, oh man, I forgot that one thing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she texts me full lists and I copy and paste them into my
Yeah.
notes thing to make sure I get it. But, in many other aspects of our lives, we rely on, we think, I'll remember this. I'll remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no way I'm going to forget this. And then we do.
Well, I'm just thinking that someone who recognizes they need to implement new habits, make these changes, and they're just dreading doing it. So
Yep.
how do you make it fun?
Yeah.
I mean, what the heck?
Yeah.
You know?
And this is the first thing when it comes to habit formation, when anybody comes to me, and because most often they are dreading it, when they say, I know I'm supposed to do this, but I'm not, it's not something they typically love doing. It's not like, I'm not supposed to be, I know I should be eating more sugar, but man, I just can't get myself to eat sugar. No, most of us are doing the things we want to do. It is oftentimes things we don't want to do. So the first step is always to make it smaller, because when we're thinking about doing something and it's becomes overwhelming in our mind, we require a pretty high level of motivation just to get started. And that really holds us back, because we think, oh my gosh, I got to do this and it's going to take a long time and I don't feel like doing it. So when you make something smaller, you reduce down the amount of activation energy, the energy necessary just to get started. You reduce that down. And so you just do one small thing just to start making progress. And progress feels really good. And so we make small progress. Now I'm starting to build momentum towards the thing I need to do and towards the person I want to become. And so the actions become more enjoyable. The second way you can make it more fun is to celebrate those small behaviors along the way. Do something small and just give yourself a little bit of a fist pump, a little pat on the back, a little bit of a, yes, I did it. Even if it's small, even if it's just one step. And now you're actually using biology to your favor, because when we celebrate ourselves, we give ourselves that fist pump, it actually releases dopamine in our brain, which is the feel good chemical. And we connect that with accomplishment of a task. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I want to feel that way again. I'm going to do that again to get to that positive emotional feeling. And so you can actually take advantage. I've talked about some of the struggles we have biologically with change. One of the ways you can overcome that is celebrating small progress, small successes, small improvement along the way to help yourself feel better. Now we start creating positive mental connections with that behavior instead of negative mental connections with that behavior and feelings of overwhelm.
So I can see the momentum. So it's like if there's 4 steps to get to
Mhm.
where you want to be, you hit step 1, you celebrate.
Yep.
Next day, go 1, 2, and you celebrate.
Yep.
The next day, 1, 2, 3. Then you're going to get to 4, and now you're repeating 1, 2, 3, 4
Yeah.
over this longer term, and it becomes
Mhm.
ingrained.
Yep. And same thing for employees. If you're trying to get employees to implement systems,
Mhm.
just give them small tasks. Get them started on a small behavior rather than focusing on all 19 steps of the process. Just, okay, let's just get step 1 done. Let's just move in that direction. I was reminded recently, Dave Ramsey uses this to great effect in, if any of you are familiar with Dave Ramsey's debt snowball concept of paying off bills. You just list out all of the debts that you have and go pay off the smallest one first. And people will argue and say, well, actually, you should pay off the one with the highest interest first, because that will be the most financially beneficial. But what Dave Ramsey is tying into there is I start building momentum. I pay that
Mm.
first one off. Now I feel better. I feel, yes, I can do this. I can pay off my debts. And now I'm starting to build momentum. And that's that same principle applied in almost any part of your life that you want. If you want to exercise more, start small. You want to eat healthier, start small. You want your salespeople to do more follow up with past clients, start small. You want salespeople to be more focused on new customer acquisition, start small. You need to improve the process of from order to delivery. Start small and just start seeing progress and momentum. And now I feel like, and organizations feel like, yeah, we can really make a difference and make progress.
You have such great energy, Jason.
I
The clients
do.
gotta
This
see
is,
feel
yeah,
that.
my most exciting thing. It's weird to be this excited about habits, but
How do people find you? I mean, do you market to them? Do they find you? What's
yeah,
that process
easiest
like?
way is my website. Somebody had jasonharwood.com, so I'm the jasonharwood.com. You can go there and find me, and or email me, Jason at thejasonharwood.com. And then you can find my book, Happily Ever Habits, on Amazon. And it will walk you through those processes, give you some assignments. It's part book, part workbook, to start small and to celebrate. And then the other step along that process is to make things easier as a way to increase your success on implementing new habits and ideas.
Did you write that book within the past year or?
Yeah, just over a year ago. It
Okay.
came out beginning of 2023. So yeah, just over a year ago.
Okay. And can people find it anywhere else besides Amazon or
Uh,
through your
yeah,
website?
yeah. There are links to it on the website. The only place currently to buy it is on Amazon.
Okay. And in that book, do you provide any success stories, case studies?
Yeah. And it's fun because I also do dabble in some podcasting myself. I've got a Happily Ever Habits podcast. And so some of the book is also some quotes and success stories and ideas from some of the people that I have interviewed on my podcast, people who have found great success through the implementation of these same habit principles. Um, and so some quotes and stories from them is a fun part of the book.
Oh, that's great to hear. Now, is there anything else you want to say to our viewing and listening audience about habits, or Jason Harwood, yourself?
I just that it's possible. We get stuck in these ruts and we get stuck in these places and we think it's too difficult. I've tried too many times. What I found is it reminds me of a story. I'll just tell a quick story that when my son was much younger, I have a son, he's now 21. When he was much younger, he was probably 7. I walked into the garage one day and found him. I like to do little woodworking projects, and I found him sitting next to a 2x4 in the garage, and it had a couple of pretty significant nails sticking kind of halfway out of it. And he was sitting there hitting these nails on this 2x4. And I thought, man, if you were to drive that nail through that 2x4 and into the cement floor of my garage, that's not great on my cement floor. And so naturally you would think I would tell my son, hey, Josh, don't hit those nails. But I thought, he's never going to do it. And I just walked in and thought, yeah, kid, hit away. And the reason for that is because he was trying to hit those nails with a Phillips screwdriver.
Oh,
And I thought, there is no way as a little kid he's ever driving a nail with a Phillips screwdriver. Now, if he had my hammer, I would have been more nervous, but he had the wrong tool. So many times, if we are trying to do things and we're not successful, it's not that you can't do it. It's not that you're incapable of doing it. It's not that you're smart enough, good enough, talented enough, whatever enough. Most often, it's that you have the wrong tool. And so the Happily Ever Habits is really trying to hand you the hammer and say, this is the right tool. This is how you actually do it. And you'll be far more successful if you simply implement starting smaller, making it easier, and then celebrating those small wins.
Well, you have convinced me that I am going to go onto Amazon. I'm going to buy 4 copies
Oh,
of
that's very
Happily Ever After Habits, and share it with my 3 kids.
Oh, there you go. Yes, I have. It's funny because my 21-year-old, he was the first one that read it and was like, "Oh wow, Dad, this is actually really good." Yeah, it turns out it is. And so, that's been fun.
Well, thank you, Jason. Thank you for this great insight into success of creating great habits and how to change them and how to approach them. I appreciate your time. And thank you very much for being a guest on my podcast.
Been a pleasure, Rick. Thanks for all the great work you're doing.
You're welcome.
You've been tuning into Is Franchising Right for You? With your host, Rick Morgin. You can find more episodes on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.